The night my son decided to parade his wealthy in-laws in front of me like proof that he had finally made it. I stood in the corner of a shining marble lobby, clutching my old leather purse, listening to them laugh about people who'd never escaped small-town thinking. My son didn't look at me the way he used to. He looked at me the way someone looks at outdated furniture still there, but slightly embarrassing. And just when the humiliation felt unbearable, the bank manager walked straight toward me, smiled warmly, and said, "Ma'am, we've been waiting for you." The silence that followed was so sharp, it felt like the air itself had cracked. Before I tell you how everything changed in that moment, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Stories of Mr. Dreamer. Because this isn't just a story about money, it's about dignity, respect, and the quiet strength people overlook every single day. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this until the very end. My name is Margaret. I'm 64 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that love meant sacrifice without applause. When my husband died unexpectedly from a heart attack, I was 42 and left with a 12-year-old boy who still needed help with his homework and still believed his father could fix anything. That night at the hospital, when they told me he was gone, I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I just held Daniel's hand and told him everything would be okay. I had no idea how, but I knew I couldn't let him see fear in my eyes. The years that followed were not glamorous. I worked double shifts at the Maple Diner 6 days a week. I poured coffee for businessmen who barely looked at me and wiped tables while my back ached so badly. I sometimes cried in the storage room for 5 quiet minutes before going back out with a smile. I missed school events. I missed sleep. I wore the same winter coat for almost a decade. But Daniel never missed a field trip. He never lacked school supplies. He never felt the weight of overdue bills the way I did. Every tip I earned, I divided carefully. Some went to groceries. Some went to utilities. And a small portion, sometimes only $20 at a time, went into a separate account. No one knew about it. Not even Daniel. After my husband died, I promised myself I would never be financially helpless again. I didn't want pity. I didn't want dependency. I wanted security. Daniel was brilliant. He had a natural talent for numbers. His teachers noticed it early. He earned a scholarship to a state university, and the day he left for college, I stood in the driveway waving as his old second-hand car disappeared around the corner. I was proud, but I was also terrified. The house felt too quiet. The kitchen table felt too big. During those years, while he was building his future, I was building something too. Slowly. Quietly. I read books about investing during my lunch breaks. I asked questions at the bank. I learned about bonds, mutual funds, and real estate. The banker I worked with at the time was patient. He explained things without making me feel small. Over time, those small deposits grew. I bought a modest rental property when the market dipped. I held on to stocks when others panicked. I never gambled. I never chased trends. I moved carefully, the same way I had learned to survive. Daniel graduated with honors and landed a job at a prestigious finance firm in the city. His starting salary was more than I had ever earned in a year. When he called to tell me, his voice was glowing with excitement. "Mom, we did it," he said. "We." That word meant everything to me. But success changes people in ways they don't always notice. The first time Daniel mentioned Claire, his voice had a new tone almost. "She comes from a very successful family," he said. "Her parents own multiple properties. They've invested internationally." I could hear admiration in his voice, maybe even pressure. When I met Claire, she was polite and well-spoken. She had perfect posture and hands that looked like they had never scrubbed dishes for hours. I liked her immediately because she seemed kind. But when I met her parents, I felt something shift. They arrived in a sleek black car that gleamed like a mirror. Her father, Richard, stepped out first, adjusting a watch that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her mother, Patricia, wore perfume so expensive it seemed to enter the room before she did. They smiled, but their eyes measured. Patricia glanced around my living room, her gaze lingering on the worn couch and faded curtains. "How charming," she said softly. It wasn't a compliment. "Dorindin," she asked. "So Margaret, what field are you in?" I wiped my hands on my apron and said gently, "I've worked at the Maple Diner for 22 years. There was a pause, a small one. but I felt it. "How quaint," she replied. Daniel quickly changed the subject, but I saw it, that flicker of embarrassment in his eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. After they left, Danielle sighed. "Mom, you don't have to emphasize the diner so much. It's just different where I am now." Different. That word stayed with me for months. As time passed, Daniel visited less. When he did, he corrected my grammar occasionally. He recommended financial articles to me, speaking slowly as if explaining things to someone older and fragile. I listened quietly. I never told him that I already understood most of what he was saying. Then one day he called with an invitation. "Mom, we're having a meeting at the bank next Friday. Claire's parents want to discuss long-term portfolio integration and family trusts. You should come. It'll be educational." Educational. Primera. Agreed. The morning of the meeting, I woke up early. I ironed my navy dress twice. I polished my shoes. I braided my silver hair neatly at the back. When I looked in the mirror, I saw lines on my face, but I also saw resilience. The bank tower downtown looked like something from another world. Glass walls, marble floors, quiet voices echoing softly. I arrived 15 minutes early, feeling both small and steady. Danielle arrived with Claire and her parents. Patricia's eyes dropped briefly to my purse. Richard shook my hand firmly, like he was testing the strength of my grip. While we waited in the lobby, Patricia laughed lightly and said, "It's interesting how some people think saving in a jar counts as financial planning." She glanced at me. Daniel chuckled awkwardly. "Mom's more traditional." Traditional. I stood there, absorbing it all. Years of serving difficult customers had taught me something important. Sometimes silence holds more power than defense. Then the branch manager approached, tall, composed, confident. He greeted Richard first. Then he turned to me. His face lit up with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Halley," he said clearly, extending his hand with respect. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person. Ma'am, we've been expecting you." The air shifted instantly. Daniel blinked. "You know my mother." The manager nodded. "Of course. Mrs. Hawley has been one of our most valued private clients for years." "Private client?" Patricia's smile froze. Richard frowned slightly. "I believe there must be some confusion." "No confusion," the manager said calmly. "Mrs. Hawley manages a diversified portfolio with us, including several real estate holdings and long-term bonds." Daniel turned to me slowly. "Mom." I met his eyes gently. "I started small," I said. "After your father died, I decided I would build security quietly. I didn't want to burden you." We were escorted into a private conference room. Screens displayed charts, properties, growth projections. The numbers were not small. They were steady, strong, impressive. The manager explained my rental properties, my bond yields, my equity positions. He mentioned the Halley Education Trust I had quietly established years ago. Daniel looked pale. "Why didn't you tell me?" I answered honestly, "Because you stopped asking about me. You were too busy trying to prove yourself to people who already had everything." The room fell silent. At the midpoint of the meeting, the manager added, "Mrs. Halley recently declined a significant buyout offer from a development group." Richard leaned forward. "Declined, why?" I folded my hands calmly. "Because I'm considering funding scholarships in our community and expanding the diner into multiple locations. That diner fed my family when nothing else could." Patricia's expression softened. For the first time, she looked uncertain. After the meeting, Daniel asked to speak privately. In the hallway, he looked like the little boy who once cried when he scraped his knee. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry. I thought you needed guidance. I thought you didn't understand this world." I smiled gently. "I understand more than you think, but I never needed to prove it." His eyes filled with tears. I was ashamed sometimes, not of you, but of where we came from. "That's the part that hurts," I said softly. "We survived that place. It shaped you. It made you hungry. Never be ashamed of the soil that grew you." Weeks passed after that meeting. Something changed. Daniel visited more often. He asked questions not about investments, but about my life. He listened when I spoke. Patricia called one afternoon and asked about my scholarship plans. Her voice was different, less sharp, more curious. Richard requested my opinion on a property acquisition. I gave it honestly, but the real transformation happened one evening at my kitchen table. Daniel sat across from me, hands clasped. "Mom," he said, "I spent years trying to fit into their world. I thought success meant distancing myself from where I came from. I didn't realize I was distancing myself from you." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Success isn't about shining brighter than others," I told him. "It's about lifting without losing yourself." He nodded slowly. "You never bragged. You never corrected me. You just let me believe I knew more." "I didn't need to compete with my own son," I said gently. "I only needed you to remember who stood beside you when you had nothing." A year later, the Halle Community Scholarship launched officially. 2 students from low-income families received full funding for college. The Maple Diner expanded into 2 additional locations, employing single parents and students who needed flexible work. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the second diner, Daniel stood beside me proudly. When someone asked who had financed the expansion, he smiled and said, "My mother. She's the smartest investor I know. But more than that," he said something else. "She taught me that real wealth isn't loud. It's patient." That night, as I sat alone on my porch watching the sunset, I thought about that moment in the marble lobby, the humiliation, the silence, the shift. I realized something important. The greatest victory wasn't the numbers on the screen. It wasn't the stunned expressions. It wasn't even the apology. It was knowing that I had never let bitterness take root in my heart. If this story touched you, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated because of your background, your job, or the way you speak? Have you ever stayed silent while someone assumed you were smaller than you are? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you have revealed everything sooner, or waited until the right moment? Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that dignity is not for sale. And if you believe quiet strength deserves recognition, subscribe to Stories of Mr. Dreamer for more stories that prove patience, resilience, and self-respect will always outshine arrogance, because sometimes the richest person in the room is the one nobody thought to notice.